My dear friends, I warmly welcome you all to your today's session of the ACCA subject F1 Accountant in Business. My dear friends, as you guys already know that since our previous lectures we have discussed in quite a detail what do we mean by a business and what are the different other kinds of organizations that exist. But primarily since in the business world we normally talk about businesses and the business environment, so therefore we not normally discuss other forms of organizations quite often on, all right? So after we discussed what business is, we discussed the types of the business, that how many types can business be performed in, and we also discussed in quite a detail about the different kinds of stakeholders that are involved in a business, all right? After discussing the stakeholders, we also had the privilege of discussing and understanding about the business environment. And after having an understanding of the business environment and the factors that actually make up this environment, we also discussed different strategies and models that are presented to us by different business management and behavioral experts, all right? So we also discussed the impacts that these different factors that form the environment of a business may have on the business, and also the different impacts that the businesses might have on its environment and the different other things, all right? So one of the most important things that we discussed in our previous lectures was the pestle analysis. And you guys know that the pestle analysis is basically an abbreviation for the political, economic, social and demographic, technological, ecological and legal factors that actually affect the environment or are either affected by the business, all right? So the other thing that we studied was the SWOT analysis, the analysis that different businesses make in order to assess their strengths, their weaknesses, the opportunities that that they have due to the external environment, and the threats that the external environment may pose to that business. We also discussed a scheme that was shared to us by Michael Porter, that is known as the Michael Porter's value chain analysis, all right, the value chain analysis. And we also discussed the Michael Porter's 5 forces model, and we have discussed all these things in quite a detail, all right? So all of these things primarily give you an understanding of what business is. If we just sum it up in a nutshell, so all these things that we have studied up till now give us a very good understanding of what is business. If you guys remember, so on our first lecture, I told you guys the name of our subject that we are studying and the meaning of that name. So the name of our subject is basically accountant in business, all right? I also told you guys the different portions of our syllabus that we are going to cover in our lectures to come and the lectures that we have already concluded with. So basically I told you guys that before we will do anything else, we will have to obtain an understanding of the word business, that I am proud to say and very happy to disclose that we already have done. Now actually we have to discuss the functions that accountants perform, or the roles that are associated, that the roles with which the accountants are associated with in performing the business, all right? The roles that the accountants are associated with in performing the different activities in the business, all right, performed by accountants. So I told you guys, and I'm just making you guys remember, that out of the a long list of roles that accountants may perform in a business, most of the important roles that are played are managerial roles. And here obviously I want to discuss the position that the accountants have, or the position that the accountants play in the management. Moreover, the accountants have their prime focus and their prime work in the field of accounting. That means the accounting department or the finance department of the business, all right? Moreover, they are also involved in the human resource sometimes. and they are also consulted before the human resource department actually formulates some of its policies. Let me tell you guys and give you guys a practical example of all this. You might have heard the name of SAP. SAP is basically a software that is currently used in large companies across the globe, and it is basically an ERP solution. All right, that means that all the programs or all the departments can be controlled and managed on your computer system through this software. That either can be the finance department, the human resource department, your procurement department, or any other department that your business operates. So basically, this software is basically implemented by special firms known as implementation firms, and this software is very costly. All right, what actually happens is that whenever a company wants to have SAP or SAP implemented in its premises, what happens is that it is basically a very long process that takes about 1 year to complete. And this process depends or varies from one company to the other company, because you know that different companies are different in nature as well as their size and other factors as well. So normally this process might take up to 8 months to 1 year. So what happens is that the first module that is set up is basically the finance module, that is represented as SAP FI. First of all, it is the SAP FI consultant that gets this thing installed and implemented, installed plus implemented. And after the finance department is set up or implemented, SAP FI is implemented in that particular organization, the other modules follow that can either be related to the cost controlling, that can either be related to the material management, that can either related to the human resource, etc. All right. So what was the purpose of giving this particular example to you guys? I wanted to emphasize on the importance of the accounting department and the role of accountants that they play in the management and also in the human resource and also in other functions of the business as well. All right. So my dear friends, in order to equip you with the knowledge that is required to enable you to function appropriately as an accountant in any business organization, whether you serve as an auditor, either external auditor or an internal auditor, whether you serve as an accountant, whether you serve in the management or you serve in any other position in any organization. So basically you have an understanding of the different sorts of communication and also the different styles of communicating within the organization in order to make your communication professional. Moreover, it is also very important for you being an accountant to understand the hierarchies that are basically involved in an organization. And whenever I will say the term hierarchy, I will always refer to the organizational structure. All right. Moreover, you guys also need an introduction about the role of an accountant in its core field, that means accounting. Moreover, you guys must also be equipped with some of the ethical principles that you guys must always uphold as an accountant and some other things. All right. So now after you have a great understanding of what business is, you have all concepts clear in your mind that what is a sole proprietorship, what is a partnership, what is a company, how are these different business kinds separate from one another, or how can we distinguish one business organization from the other. You also have an understanding of what different kinds of organizations do we have. We have cooperatives, we have public organizations, we have non-government organizations, and obviously the commercial and business organizations, of which we have made the whole or entire discussion about. We also understand the different stakeholders involved, and you know that stakeholders can be internal stakeholders or they can be connected stakeholders, or they can be external stakeholders. You guys have great knowledge of all these terminologies now. You also understand the things or the different factors from which the environment of the business comes from, or from which the environment of the business is actually made. And you also know the techniques that were explained to you in the pestle analysis, that how do you assess the impacts of the different environmental factors on the business and the impacts of the business on these environmental factors. You also learned SWOT analysis. That means that you also have an understanding of how to understand the strengths, weaknesses, the opportunities and threats that are basically faced by the or presented to the business. All right. You also know that what happens when a business actually works in a competitive environment, and what to deal, how to deal in a competitive environment, and what options do a business has to survive in a competitive environment. You guys have all the required knowledge in this regard. Now, my dear friends, the most important thing that lies ahead in front of you is basically to obtain an understanding about the organizational structure. The organizational structure. All organizations, whether they are commercial organizations, whether they are non-commercial organizations. And whenever I talk about non-commercial organizations, so basically I am referring to all the remaining three types of organizations, in which are included the public organizations, the non-government organizations, as well as the cooperatives. So basically, I'm not limiting my discussion up to a commercial organization only. Rather, I am telling you guys that all sorts of our organizations that basically exist, all organizations have an organization structure. Now, you guys might be confused. What actually do I mean by the word structure over here? So, have you guys ever thought about the steps that are involved in the construction of a house or a building of any kind? First of all, what happens that the foundations are laid. The foundations are basically the basis on which the whole building that is being constructed stand. All right. The foundations are first of all laid, and then after the foundations are laid, what happens that basically the structure rises up. How does the structure rises up? First of all, the walls are created, the rooms are constructed, and later on the roof is basically installed on this structure that is being constructed. And once the roof is set up, what happens? We say that the gray structure is completed. After the gray structure is completed, what happens that you guys then strive for having that particular building that is being constructed to get cemented. Once it is cemented, obviously you will want the carpenters to do the woodwork. You will want the electricians to make the necessary electricity installments in your building. You will want the different kinds of fuel connections, such as gas connections or some other sort of connections to be installed, so that you guys can easily use these facilities whenever and as you guys please in your building. Similarly, after all of the other things are done, what do you guys strive for? You guys will want that particular house or building to be painted, and so that it is now ready to be used, to be brought into its intended use. So now, what is the purpose that I am telling you all of this? I am basically trying to explain you the structure of a house or a building that is being constructed. All right. So if you talk about the structure of an organization, so over here in this particular definition, I do not refer to the structure that I have just explained right now. I have just explained these terminologies because I want to make an inference, make a deduction out of this explanation in order to explain this terminology of organization structure. By the terminology of organization structure, we actually mean the different levels of reporting and hierarchy within that organization. Reporting and hierarchy within that particular organization. If you guys may remember, in a few lectures back than this lecture or from this lecture, I told you guys the typical hierarchy that is involved in an accountant's firm. The hierarchy normally operates in the following manner: that first of all, it is the partner, that means the owner of the firm, under which work the different directors. The directors are the second in the line of authority, and below the directors come the different managers, and below the managers come the supervisors. The supervisors can also be divided into senior supervisors and semi-senior supervisors, etc. Below the supervisors come the team. For example, if you talk about uh, an accountant's firm that is engaged in conducting audit for any organization, any other organization, so basically what happens that it is basically then the audit team. The audit team can further be segregated into the senior members, and then come the junior members. All right. So this is basically an example of an organization structure with respect to the hierarchy that is maintained. Now, obviously, the juniors are answerable to their seniors. The seniors are answerable to whom? The supervisors. The supervisor is answerable to the manager. The manager answerable ultimately to the director, and the director is answerable to the partner himself. And ultimately, for any uh, particular engagement in which this team is involved, the partner is basically the responsible person, and he is basically the person responsible to the client. All right. So I have just explained this particular terminology and this particular hierarchy as an example to you, so that you guys have understanding of what do I actually mean by an organization structure. All right. So after having an understanding of business, now has come the time that you guys must understand the different types of organization structure that we will try to understand and learn in this particular section, section B of your syllabus. All right. So my dear friends, before we formally commence this particular topic of organization structure, let me tell you guys two terminologies that are used for an organization. So my dear friends, you know that organizations by their function and by their legal status and their operations can be divided into four kinds. But here I am writing two different types of organizations for your understanding. All right. And these types of organizations are valid for all the different types you already know. For example, a commercial, non-commercial organization. All right. So basically, there is a terminology of a formal organization. Formal organization. So, my dear friends, let us try to define what a formal organization is. So, my dear friends, you already know the definition of an organization, and what is that? You know that an organization is basically a group or a collection of people. First of all, the very first part of the definition. And what is the second part? It is basically a group or collection of people that have common goals. And since we are discussing about a formal organization, so what is basically a formal organization? A group or collection of people that have common goals where proper job description is attached. Proper job description, it is normally termed as a JD while we abbreviate it, and hierarchy is attached. This type of an organization where proper jobs are assigned to different people and proper level of hierarchy is maintained or attached. Let us write maintained over here because this seems more appropriate. So such a collection of people having common goals where all the people involved in that organization are assigned proper jobs for which they are responsible and answerable, and where proper hierarchy is maintained. Such an organization is known as a formal organization. Now, what is basically the advantage of a formal organization? Or if I say that, what do I actually mean by having proper job description or JD attached or proper hierarchy maintained? So basically this is beneficial so that all individuals know their roles and what they are expected to do. All right, all individuals know their roles, what they are expected, and also there is a well-defined system in place for ensuring that job descriptions are followed, and also a division of labor is also maintained in such an organization. All right, a well defined system is in place. Now my dear friends, this can be a question in your minds that what do we actually mean by a well defined system, and why is it in place in a formal organization? So as I told you guys earlier, that in a formal organization all employees have to do specialized tasks that are assigned to them. So obviously this is not alone necessary that only the JDs are basically given to the different employees and they are just told to do that, we have to do this and that. We also need to have a system in place that checks that whether all employees have performed the assigned task to them or have they not. And if they have performed it, so are those tasks performed at a satisfactory level, or they are beyond, or they are below the expectations. All right, so this is why a check is basically maintained through a specialized system or a well-defined system. All right, and this system is basically maintained through the hierarchy that is set up in the organization. All right, moreover, with the help of this system, division of labor is ensured. Division of labor basically means that different people are awarded different tasks. This is achieved when you award them with their particular and specified job descriptions. Every individual knows that what is he expected to do in that organization, and what is his job, and what things constitute in that particular job that he is actually performing. All right, so when every individual is performing a different and specified task, so this means that there is a division of labor. Labor is basically work over here. You can define it as a work, and division of labor means division of work. All right. So there is another important thing that you guys might have observed in such an organization, that when division of labor is basically done, that means that all people are basically performing the work that they are assigned. So it is possible that different people who have similar job descriptions, they are formed a team. Isn't it possible? For example, there are two employees, Mr. A and Mr. B, and let's suppose there is another employee, Mr. C. Now there are three employees, and these three employees have a similar job description. Let's suppose that these employees are required to work in the production department. All right, so these three people or employees will form a team, and they will be required to work together. All right, so basically teams are formed, and when teams are formed, what happens, that friendships takes place. Friendship takes place. So my dear friends, you know that when you have friends at work, what happens? Friends discuss each and everything among themselves. They also crack jokes together. They also eat and drink together, and they also enjoy working together. Means that a very comfortable environment is established when friendship develops within a team. All right, so what happens when friendship happens, or friendship is developed between the different employees that are working in a team or in a particular informal organization, they basically pass information to one another other than the formal network. And by the formal network, I mean the hierarchy that is maintained by that organization. For example, Mr. A receives a news from the organization, and without waiting for the official channel to communicate the same news to the other employees of the organization, Mr. A already communicates that piece of information to his colleagues, Mr. B and Mr. C, because Mr. A, B, and C are friends. All right. So this is basically a common practice. So what happens that basically an informal network is created. An informal network is created, and this network is known as an informal organization. An informal organization. All right. So what is an informal organization? If you try to define it, again, it is basically a collection of people. In the second phase, it is also a collection of people having common goals. For example, if you talk about Mr. A, Mr. B, and Mr. C, so Mr. A, B, and C, when they are working in a team, so they are basically a collection of people. And they also have a common goal. What is that common goal? For example, if they are basically associated with the production department, so their common goal is to work for the production of the organization in which they are working as an employee. But what is the third thing that separates an informal organization from a formal organization? The third thing is that there are informal relationships or informal attractions. And what do we mean by informal relations? Means those relations that do not follow proper hierarchy. Don't follow proper hierarchy.